Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I'm excited for you to meet Brian Sachetta. He is the owner and author of Get Out of Your Head, which is a brand and book series that really helps folks deal with anxiety and depression and how to work through it. Brian is a software developer, and he combines his experience in the tech world with previous mental health battles to draw parallels between computer systems and the human mind and really give you practical strategies to kind of get out of your own way when it comes to your psychological demons. He currently has 2 books on the market that we're going to talk about, as well as his mission is to really help as many sufferers as possible through not only their self journey in the books, but also, just to get more information through his blog and podcast and educate and create that awareness as much as possible. So thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today.
Hey, Daniela. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, I know when we kind of did our pre-chat, you speak to something that's just close to my heart when it comes to raising that awareness and conversation around mental health, mental wellness, and just kind of normalizing all of this because we all go through things. We all need to talk about it. And, how you blend the two between your tech world and this is amazing. But can you tell us a little bit more about your story, your journey, and what led you to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. I want to keep things sort of brief, but it is almost like a 10 or 20 year journey there. So I'll try to pick and choose. Started in 2008 for real, right? I think a lot of us can look back and say, in 4th grade, I was nervous about X. In 6th grade, I was nervous about Y, right? In 2008, I would say that I had my first panic attack. So that was a real introduction to the subject of mental health and anxiety, right? I was on a date with a girl that I liked, had been kind of seeing her, but not really dating, just totally freaked out. My heart was racing, my palms were sweating. I had no idea what to say, what to do, whatever. I got really nervous. That date obviously didn't go so well. That relationship sort of fell off the tracks, if you will. And then the same thing happened with a different girl about 6 months later. And it really hit me after that second event to be like, okay, relationships are really important to me. My emotions and my mental health are important to me, but I'm clearly dealing with something or I'm confronting something that I don't know how to deal with, that being the anxiety. And so that second panic attack was a wake-up moment to be like, if I want to succeed in my life and in my relationships, I have to figure out what this is. And so long story short that was almost the beginning of the journey, me saying, hey, I need to go do the work. And then for 10, maybe even more than 10 years, really doing that work and figuring out, okay, what is mental health? What is anxiety? What is depression? What are some of the tactics that I could apply in my own life that might work, that might not work, and then eventually turning around, synthesizing that information that I had discovered and sharing it with other people, right? One of the things that I say in my book is, or about my books is, I do throw a lot of different ideas and information at the reader at the same time, I do need to curate things, right? I'm not just going to say, here's everything under the sun that you could try. I want to infuse my experience and say, hey, in the anxiety space, for example, right? Creative visualization can be dangerous, and here's why. So I want to give a little, infuse that expertise a little bit to be able to give folks some confidence that the tactics that I put forth in my writing will possibly get them where they're looking to go.
Yeah. And definitely, I want to state, this does not take the place of mental health counseling. You're not a therapist, this is not meant to be a substitute for getting actual treatment if that's where you're at. I think, just having this knowledge and awareness, though, kind of supplements that, because so many times, you get that hour session with your therapist. It might be every week, it might be every other week, but a lot of times you still have questions, or sometimes sometimes just hearing what somebody else has been through and having kind of that Me Too moment, even if it's just virtually via the book or the podcast or the blog or that type of thing, can help you feel less alone and less isolated in the process.
Yeah, perfect way to put it, right? I am definitely not trying to replace anything in the treatment field, right? If anything, I'm trying to sit alongside your therapist and say, like, to your point, Daniela, if you go to therapy for, the equivalent, I guess, usually there's some note taking at the end of the session. So if you have an hour-long session, it might be 48 minutes, it might be 50 minutes. That's a short period each week. Not that that time can't be invaluable, but at the same time, then you go home and, usually the therapist will say, do some homework. Here is some homework. But again, at the same time, it's kind of I'll give a bad analogy of saying, if you're looking to get fit, right? If you want to be physically fit, you go to the gym once a week, it's probably, you're not going to get the results quite that you're looking for. So I feel as though I can come in and help be a supplement for folks and just get a little bit more information. So yeah, definitely on that train of thought.
Well, and I love to, you talk about the fact that it's a journey, it's a practice. It took you time to continually do things. This wasn't like a quick fix. It's not a one and done when you're working through these different types of things. And in general, when I talk about, the reason it's called a practice is because that's what you have to do. And I think, again, just having that lens of being able to show people, the progress might seem small. It might seem like even backwards probably some days, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. That doesn't mean it's not helpful. And I think, again, having that reassurance, having that model for people to see is then what helps it not be so discouraging and frustrating when it's like, I've been doing this for 2 months and nothing's helped.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's one of those things, right, of it is scary to open up about your struggles. It's, we go to therapy and we're afraid, right, of admitting that we're dealing with these things. At the same time, right, my brand is a little bit in your face to kind of break you out of that mold and say, like, subconsciously, it's like, hey, I'm radically talking about these things. So it's okay. Like, you don't have to hide this. You know what I mean? If you want, take my book on the train and maybe somebody will come up to you and say, wow, that's a really cool book cover. What are you reading? And then it sparks a fun conversation. The other thing about just the work that I do in general, right, is I understand that therapy can be inaccessible for many people. So again, my work is not meant to be a replacement. But if you are in a position where you're like, I can't find a therapist, I can't afford a therapist, there's no therapist near me, at least you have something, that you could use in the form of a book or a podcast or whatever. Again, not trying to be a replacement, but just giving folks tools, because that's what we need when we're deep in the battle,
Right. And it definitely reinforces things. A lot of times when you're sitting in a session talking to somebody, you forget over time, the different things that come up. And so this is just another way to provide that reinforcement, because it's going to take sometimes hearing the same thing a couple of different times before it resonates, before you kind of get comfortable with that uncomfortable and vulnerability, like you said, because it can, you kind of look at it and you're like, I don't know, should I say something? Should I do something? Am I overreacting? Is this something that I need to really pursue? And so it definitely opens so many doors for individuals to be able to find different outlets, to be able to find that community, I think, to really help them kind of take those next steps.
Absolutely.
So, what can you break down? Because you have 2 books. So each one deals a little bit differently, right?
Yeah. So the 2 books are, the first one is centered around helping folks manage anxiety. So that's called Get Out of Your Head, a Toolkit for Living with and Overcoming Anxiety. And then the second one revolves around depression. So that is called Get Out of Your Head, Volume 2, Navigating the Abyss of Depression. And again, it's like both are, I may not have said it explicitly, but both books are geared towards helping folks manage those respective conditions. The first book, right, I like to say it is likely more action oriented. And the reason for that has to do with the distinction between the 2 diseases themselves, right? So, and I use that term disease loosely, right? The condition, right? If you're dealing with anxiety, a lot of the times we will synonymize anxiety with our acute stress response, the fight or flight system in the body revving up. And obviously that's not the whole kit and caboodle when it comes to anxiety, but it's a big part of it. And so if you can get that acute stress response to tamp down a little bit, sometimes or often the anxiety goes with it. Therefore, my first book is sort of built upon that premise in saying, here are a lot of tactics that you could leverage right now that might calm down your nervous system and therefore mitigate some of the anxiety. So, with that, I guess from that frame, I'm throwing a lot of different tactics at the reader that could help them do such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
With the second book, I admittedly say, hey, depression, it doesn't really have there's not so much of a specific system in the body that regulates it or that we can associate it with, right? Obviously, there's the limbic system, there's neurotransmitters and whatnot, but I can't say, hey, anxiety is sort of the acute stress response. Depression is some other equivalent, right? And so what that really means is that one-off in the moment tactics are harder, right? It's harder to
Yeah.
suss those out, to pull those out, and then give them to folks. So the second book is more of a holistic approach of saying like, okay, you're in a depressed state. Let's say that is your current condition, because otherwise maybe you wouldn't read the book, right? Let's sort of break down your life and figure out what are the potential causes of the feeling that you are experiencing right now that we call depression, right? And then so it's basically looking at the biological, psychological, and social factors in your life, modeled after this thing called the biopsychosocial model, and helping folks reevaluate their life in general, maybe rebuild some parts of their lives that will eventually get the dark cloud, so to speak, that's hanging over them to move aside.
Yeah. And I love just the fact that you're providing a lot of information, because so many times a lot of people avoid different pursuing different treatments because of just a lack of information or misinformation, and the thing is, I always like to look at it, we all have periods of anxiety. It's normal. We all have ups and downs where we're feeling maybe a little low. That's normal too. And there's a difference between experiencing these things in an acute level versus clinically having that diagnosis and that type of thing, and I love to talk about mental wellness, mental fitness, almost similarly like we do physical fitness, where sometimes just having that awareness and information can help you build in those protective factors, that resilience, and so to use these even from that standpoint, to have not only that awareness, but to know how can I strengthen ahead of time before something happens, before I'm, in a hard place, is so helpful as well. But a lot of times we only isolate that type of thinking only to physical fitness. Like, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to build my muscles, I'm going to be strong so that as I get older, I don't break a hip or whatever. But it's the same thing mentally. If we build our fitness, we build those same skills mentally, we can withstand hardships. We can go through life's ups and downs. We can have those panic moments, but not have them consume us in a way that then is disabling.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one thing that I do want to say, though I hesitate to say it a little bit because it can come off as scary at first, which is basically, I think a lot of folks coming into the space will say, I'm going to read a book, I'm dealing with anxiety, I'm going to get my hands around anxiety, or I'll get a grip on anxiety, and then I'm never going to experience anxiety again, right?
Yeah.
In reality, what is likely to happen is you are going to change. Your life is going to change. You may have started, experiencing anxiety when you got into the workforce and you're in an entry level job. And maybe 20 years later, you're the CEO or something like that, right? And your problems in life are going to change. And therefore, it's almost like anxiety and maybe depression. I don't know, but certainly anxiety or stress will come at you in different forms. And so one of the reason why I liked how you said, we have to think about like what tools are we going to use? We need to strengthen our muscles when it comes to dealing with stressors and anxieties is the fact that there will always be new stressors. There will always be new things that can scare us, right? And the more that we build our toolkits, the better prepared we are for all those new phase changes in the anxiety and in the stress itself. The reason why I say I hesitate to bring this up at first is, I think a lot of us want to say like, well, I guess another way of looking at it is the negative reaction to what I'm saying is that anxiety never goes away. There's always stress, there's always anxiety, right? The more positive way of interpreting it is that you can build those skills, you can build those muscles such that you are a little bit more impervious to the dangers, the stressors, the anxiety-provoking moments that come your way, because they are going to come your way in one form or another. But the stronger those muscles are, the better you will be, the better prepared you will be to fight them off, or to make it such that you don't have the same reaction to them that you would have previously, and therefore things don't spiral out of control.
Absolutely. As well as a lot of times those moments, they can be very positive things. Some of our most stressful moments on those indicators are like getting married, buying a house, having kids, which are awesome, happy events, but they can still trigger different stress responses. And so definitely, having those tools and ability to deal with them are allowing you then to step into that next level of those things that maybe you've been working for that you want to happen, but that can still, trigger some of that fear and anxiety. But I love that you brought up the toolkits, because I definitely would love to know, what would you say are some of your go-to strategies, coping skills that you've kind of really honed in on over the years?
Yeah. So for the full download, unfortunately, I have to make this plug and just say that folks will have to pick up the book if we're talking about anxiety specifically, right? To give a more abbreviated, or to actually put something concrete behind this, right? What I like to say is that there is high level and low level strategies. And obviously it's a spectrum or a gradient. There's stuff in the middle too. But the low level is sort of, what are the tactics that you can implement in the middle of anxiety? When you are feeling stressed, when you are feeling fearful, what can you do? What can you say to yourself to walk some of those emotions back, right? So in the first book, I have what I call my 10 steps to getting out of your head. Those are those low level strategies that folks can implement in order to walk back some of those emotions. So we could hit one real quick, which is basically number 5 on the 10-step list, is just to recite a powerful mantra, right? So you're in the middle of a job interview, or you're preparing for a job interview and you're nervous about it. And you just, it sounds corny, and it kind of is, but you just find some sentence that makes you feel a little bit better, and you just repeat it to yourself ad nauseum. It gives you something to distract from everything that's swirling in your mind, right? So if you have to say to yourself, everything's going to go great during this job interview, or I'm going to do great during this job interview, and that feels good to you, just, repeat it. The high level stuff is more, okay, so we're not thinking so much about being in the middle of an anxiety provoking moment, but we are saying to ourselves, like, how do we get into fewer of those anxiety provoking moments in the first place? So that is more thinking about the daily structure, or your daily routine, right? So is your home life, is your work life, is your social circle bringing you stress and anxiety? If that is the case, then maybe you need to rethink some of those things, right? If you are constantly at work stressed out, and then that stress leads to anxiety, you may have to say to yourself, either I need to find a new job, or I need to work with my team to make it such that I experience less stress in this role. Otherwise, I'm going to keep falling back into those anxiety provoking moments, or just anxiety laced moments. And then, me pulling out those tactics, they may work a little bit, but if I'm constantly fighting the fire, it's eventually I'm going to be like, what am I even doing here?
Right. So are those some of the statements that you say to yourself that you're doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely use mantras in my own life. They change, right? It's like I have a couple in the book that I cite. So one is breath, focus, outcome. And I actually developed that one time when I was going into, a situation that scared me. And I was like, I think I was maybe 21, 22. And I was like, normally what I do in my head is I rehearse the situation, or this was 10, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I would rehearse the situation, and I'd be like, here's what I want to happen. I see myself succeeding. I see the result that I want coming to fruition. I tried a strategy like that for a really long time. And then eventually, as I sort of alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, I eventually got to the point where I was like, at least for me, and for many folks that I know, that visualization doesn't actually work, because there's so much fear wrapped up in it when you're already anxious about this situation, that the more you visualize, the more you try to predict those moments, the more fear you feel. So I created this when I was going to some event that scared me, and I said, okay, breath, focus, outcome, right? Instead of focusing specifically on all the details of, I see myself, answering all the questions in this job interview correctly, and the person smiling at me and whatever, almost this sort of obsessive compulsive sort of thing that I was doing in my mind. I was like, take a step back, take a breath, focus on your breathing. Don't focus on, the scariness of the possibility. If it's helpful, next move to figuring out what your focus is. So saying, am I focusing on scary outcomes that could become of this situation? Or am I focusing on just going and having a good time, right? And then finally, the outcome piece is related to that one, which is basically, if I'm focusing on something that scares me, I might go and say, I'm thinking about all these scary possibilities coming out of this job interview, when I'm forgetting the fact that I could actually go and I could succeed and I could actually get the job that I'm looking for, right? Remind myself of that real quickly, see if it helps. If not, I go back to my breathing, and that's that. So that one is breath, focus, outcome. The other mantra that I talk about in the book, and this doesn't spoil anything. There's a lot of content in the book, but one that I adopted from Tony Robbins, who is a personal development guru, pioneer, whatever you want to call him. He says, if you get in your head, you're dead, right? And I just love it's kind of bold, right? Where it really shifts you out of the mindset that you're currently in. So if you're stewing on some scary possibility, if you're turning over frightening ideas in your mind, you're in your head, you're feeling bad. And, his equivalent of that is, quote unquote, you are dead, right? Obviously, you're not going to die if you, for the most part, 99.99% of the time, if you think scary thoughts, but emotionally, you're not going to feel good. And so it's a reminder to say to yourself, like, man, I'm doing that thing again. I am obsessing. I am in my head. I need to get out of there. And it's sort of just, again, it's a way of quickly and almost like boldly turning the page.
Yeah, it's a great reminder then to bring in some of those mindfulness practices to help you get grounded in the present, whether it's your senses, whether it's going outside and putting your feet on the ground, going for a forest therapy walk out in nature, those types of things. So those are great practices. I also love to talk about gratitude as an underutilized kind of form of self-care, personal development, because I really think the benefits from gratitude, they're the ones that kind of like you can take with you anywhere. Nobody knows you're doing them, but the benefits are huge. And so I always ask my guests, what would you say are kind of like 2 to 3 things you're the most grateful for?
Two or three things I'm most grateful for. I mean, my family is definitely one of them. My parents have been very supportive on this journey, and I certainly, like, without my mom, I would not have. I don't know where I'd be. I probably wouldn't have written a book. I probably wouldn't have made it so far. And I mean that in terms of like, I just think I'd be in a bad place, So that's certainly one. Oh man, I don't know. Just I would say basically like I am grateful for the fact that I have a mission that I can share with folks that impacts them in a strong way, right? I understand that it's not that it's ever been easy, right? But like to wake up and to be able to try to contribute towards that mission and help people with their mental health is something that, just really fires me up and gets me excited. And finally, kind of just like my life overall, I grew up in a nice town. I had a really nice childhood. Like, I look around and I just think to myself, like, there are days, right, where you sort of buy into this trap that like your problems are worse than anyone else's. And then when I go back to the gratitude, I'm kind of like, all right, dude, take a breath, look around. These problems seem big right now, but you can always compare up or down, and there's a lot of ways to compare down, and to be able to look at that and say, in a week, this problem at work or whatever it may be, it's going to go away and it's not going to be a big deal. Like, I'm very fortunate to be able to say that sort of thing.
No, definitely. I love all of those. I've had some other guests as well where they say, the journey, even the hard things are things that they're grateful for sure. So how can people find your book, Brian? How can they find you, listen to your podcast, work with you?
Yeah, best place would be my website. So that's getoutofyourhead.com. All one word, no dashes, no spaces. On social media at the moment, I am most active. Not that it's incredibly active, but on Instagram. So the handle there is Get Out of Your Head as well. No dashes, no spaces in that either. Please feel free to DM me, send me a message. I love talking to folks in this space. If I can help you, if I can refer you to somebody else, like really the mission, which is, it's funny at times where it's like my mission first and foremost is to help people. I get to the point where I'm like, there are many times where it's like, I could be like, hey, buy this book, buy this product. But I care so much about helping people that at times it's like, I could see a future where I make $0 on writing, but I help people. And as long as I can pay my bills, which is a big if, I would be okay with that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for joining me today. All those links will be live in the show notes below. And I can't wait to, watch you on your journey and continue to support you on this.
Thanks, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.